One of the characters in The Merchant of Venice is Launcelot. Now, he's a bit of a nonsensical character. He also provides a comic element in the play, because remember, at the end of the day, The Merchant of Venice is essentially a comedy, right? So, Act 2, Scene 2 is where he's introduced in the play after the main characters Antonio, Portia, Shylock, Bassanio are all introduced, right? Even the Prince of Morocco. Now, Launcelot and his father Gobbo are introduced to us in Act 2, Scene 2. So, we will be doing Act 2, Scene 2 in two parts. The first part deals with the interaction between Launcelot and his father Gobbo. The second part is the interaction between Launcelot and his new master Bassanio, because Launcelot so far for so many years has been in the service of the Jew Shylock, and he intends to leave the service of Shylock because he is unhappy in his household and move to the service of Bassanio. So, that's what this scene is all about. Normally, this scene generally questions are not asked from this scene, but in the 2020 board examination, class 10, one of the dialogues of Launcelot was asked as a question. So, you obviously cannot ignore it, and even if you think that last year it was asked, this year it may not come in 2021. I would advise definitely class 9 students to look at this very carefully. And this year in 2021, because all of you have gone through online classes, it's quite possible that instead of the very heavy duty kind of scenes and dialogues, people may actually decide to surprise you with asking a scene involving a minor character like Launcelot. So, as I said, he's a comic guy in the play. Now, there are three purposes essentially of having him in the play. One, of course, is to kind of create jest. The other is also to show up Shylock's true face, because remember, he's a servant to Shylock. And number three, his equation with Gobbo, his father, and it's yet another father-child equation in contrast, or some kind of a different equation from that of Shylock and his daughter Jessica, right? So, though there is an element of dislike, and here also he does not seem to have the best of relationship with his father. He's always trying to make fun of his father Gobbo, right? So, let's start with the paraphrasing of this particular scene. This is part 1, and in part 2, as I said, we will do the Launcelot-Bassanio interaction. Lancelot says, certainly my conscience, and if you see the way this has been printed, it has been printed without giving a gap, and it's also to kind of convey that that's the way Lancelot spoke a lot without giving a gap, and spoke continuous nonsense, right? So basically he's saying that I'm sure I will feel guilty if I run away from the Jew who is my master, that's Shylock. The devil is actually sitting on my shoulder, the fiend is at mine elbow. The devil is right on me, forcing me, tempting me rather, to saying to me, Gobbo, Lancelot, Gobbo, good Launcelot, or good Gobbo, or good Launcelot, Gobbo, use your legs, take the start, run away. So it is saying, it's tempting me and telling me to use my legs and run away from the service of Shylock, right? But my conscience is telling me something completely opposite. My conscience is telling me, no, take heed, honest Launcelot, take heed, honest Gobbo, or as foresaid, honest Launcelot, Gobbo, do not run. Scorn running with thy heels. So basically it is telling him not to run away. So completely divergent opinions coming, one from the devil and one from the conscience, right? But then he says, my conscience which is hanging around my heart says very wisely to me, my good friend Launcelot, you are a good boy, the son of an honest man, right? You are the son of an honest man, or rather an honest woman's son, right? Well, my conscience says, Launcelot, budge not, budge says the fiend, budge not says the conscience. So basically trying to say that they are saying completely different things. So basically saying the honest man, or it could be an honest woman, because kind of indicating that, you know, the father cheated on his wife, that is his mother. So that's why he's kind of correcting himself, saying that the son of a honest woman, an honest woman's son. So basically the devil and the conscience giving totally different opinions to Launcelot Gobbo. So he says, but if I ran away from the Jew, I would be following the advice of who? The advice of the devil, not the advice of the conscience. The conscience is telling him to stay put with Shylock, right? And he says, The Jew actually is the devil incarnate. He is like the devil himself. Shylock is like the devil himself, and my conscience is actually giving me a tough time. It's actually giving me a hard time by asking me to stay with the Jew. Right? So it's, you would normally expect that the conscience will tell him something in his own interest, but here the conscience is telling him to stick on, while the devil is tempting him and saying run away from Shylock. So he says the devil's advice is actually nicer. So he prefers the devil's advice. So he says, I will run, devil, tell me to run and I will run away. Right? That's when old Gobbo, his father, enters with a basket. Right? Before we go on to what old Gobbo is saying, so basically Launcelot wants his conscience to help him decide to run away, but it is a devil which is actually advising him to run away. And the very devil incarnate again is a mistake, because Launcelot is also used to kind of saying things wrongly, using wrong English words. So basically he wants to use the word incarnate, but he uses the word incarnal, right? And he says Shylock is himself a devil in human flesh. So Gobbo asks him, and then there is this long piece of interaction between Gobbo and Launcelot. Gobbo says, excuse me young man, how do I get into the Jew's residence? He wants to go to Shylock's house. Launcelot to himself, aside, that is not being heard by Gobbo, oh heavens, this is my true begotten father, who being more than sand blind, high gravel blind, knows me not. I will try confusions with him. So he wants to play tricks with him. So basically, three things here. The way he says Master Jews. So basically, even if the Jew's house name is not mentioned, everyone knows that the reference is to Shylock. Also shows how famous Shylock is in the city of Venice. Then true begotten father. Again, you know, it's a bit of a pun, because obviously it's a father who begets a son. Sand blind means half blind, and half gravel blind means fully blind, right? So his eyesight obviously in very poor condition, right? So he says, let me play a little game with him. So master young gentleman, I pray you, which is the way to Master Jew? So he wants to know the way to go to the Jew's house. And Launcelot tells him, you know, turn right at the next turn, next turning, turn left, and then at the next turn. So basically gives him rather detailed instructions. And Gobbo obviously says they are very difficult instructions to follow. Can you tell me if a man named Launcelot who lives with him is still there? Okay, so he assumes that if this fellow knows the Jew's house, he would also know about the whereabouts and the present position of his son Launcelot. So he says, are you talking about young Master Launcelot? You know, and then speaking in an aside, Mark, watch out, because I am now going to pull out a prank. And he says, is it Master Launcelot you are talking about? And this is a little important, because he wants to enhance his own stature by referring to himself as a Master Launcelot, right? Because servants in those times would not be having the prefix of a master, and that's why he's a bit of a clownish, also a bit of a rogue kind of a servant who decides that he will now want to be addressed as master, and that's how he pulls this prank on, carries out this prank with his father Gobbo, right? Because his father has also not identified him, because he's partially almost fully blind. So he says, no master sir, but a poor man's son, his father, though I say it is honest, exceeding poor man, and God be thanked, well to live. So he says, no, he's not a master. He's just a poor man's son. His father, even if I say it myself, is an honest but a very poor man, and likely to live for a very long time. So Launcelot says, well, his father can be whatever he wants to be, but we are talking at this point in time about young Master Launcelot. So he says, yes, I am also talking about Launcelot. Launcelot says, yes, his father can be whatever he wants to be, but we are talking about young Master Launcelot. So Gobbo says that, you know, he's not a master, he's just a poor man's son, and his father is actually an honest and a poor man, and likely to live for a long time. Launcelot says, let his father be whatever, but here we are talking about young Master Launcelot. So continuing to refer to himself as Master Launcelot. Gobbo says, please don't call him sir, just call him Launcelot, don't refer to him as Master Launcelot. So Launcelot, then he says, excuse me old man, I am asking if you are talking about young Master Launcelot. So Gobbo says, and then it just goes on, you know, he referring to him as Launcelot, he referring to him as Master Launcelot, right? And then he says, according to fates and destinies and such odd sayings, the sisters three and such branches of learning is indeed deceased, or as you would say in plain terms, gone to heaven. So basically this is an important kind of reference, basically referring to the three sisters who control destiny and other branches of learning, right? So basically to say that he has gone to heaven. Now just to kind of explain the sisters three, now these three sisters were fate or destiny, and they kind of they were Clotho, who kind of spun the thread, Lachesis, who gave to man as his fate, and Atropos cut it off when his life was to come to an end. And according to classical mythology, they symbolized fate and destiny. So you would need to kind of remember the names of the three sisters. I'll repeat: Clotho, Clotho, Lachesis, Lachhesis, and Atropos, Atropos, were the three sisters who controlled, who symbolized fate as well as destiny. Now basically Shakespeare, what he is doing out here is kind of satirizing those who did not use any kind of plain speech, but kind of use this kind of bombastic language, and that's what Launcelot is doing here right now, basically using a lot of bombastic words and phrases by referring to the three sisters. Gobbo, marry, God forbid, the boy was the very staff of my age, my very prop. So he says the son was actually was going to support me in my old age, right? So basically when he's kind of giving him a hint, you know, that something untoward may have happened to Launcelot. So Launcelot says it in an aside: do I look like a cudgel or a hovel post, a staff or a prop? Do you know me, father? So he says, what? Do I look like a cane? Do I look like a prop? Do I look like this kind of a support? And then he asks, do you recognize me, father? Gobbo says, heaven help me, I don't know you, sir, but please tell me, is my boy alive or dead, right? So he gets a doubt and he gets a bit of a shock that his son Launcelot could well be dead. Launcelot, you really don't recognize me, father? Alack, sir, I am sand blind. I know you not. So I am partially blind. So I am half blind. So Launcelot says, even if you had your eyes, you still might not recognize me. It takes a wise father to know his own son. Now these lines of Launcelot are also important. So he says it's a wise father who knows his own child, because when you do that, you could also get questions which could run parallel to the Shylock Jessica kind of a story. As I said, there are two father-child references, relationships out here. So they could ask you questions also about how would you interpret the Shylock Jessica relationship in the light of what Launcelot is saying to his father. It's a wise father who knows his own child. Well, old man, I will tell you the news of your son. Give me your blessing. Truth will come to light. Murder cannot be hid long. A man's son may, but in the end, truth will be out. So he says, old man, I will give you the news of your son. Give me your blessing. The truth will come to light. Any murder cannot be hidden for too long. A man's son may hide, but truth will finally come out. Again using a lot of words to sound intelligent, right? Also, it is a child. It's a wise father that knows his own child is actually the flipping of a more famous proverb, because it's a it's an inversion. It's normally the child who knows his father. It's a wise child who knows his own father. Gobbo, pray you, sir, stand up. I am sure you are not Launcelot, my boy. So now Gobbo is kind of getting convinced that I don't think you are not Launcelot. So he says, come on, quit fooling around. Give me your blessing. I am Launcelot, who was your boy, is your son, and will be your child. He says, I can't believe that you are my son. Launcelot says, I don't know what to say to that, but the fact is that I am Launcelot, the Jew's servant, and Marjorie, that is your wife, is my mother. So he has to bring in the reference of the mother of Gobbo's wife in order to kind of confirm, in order to convince Gobbo that it is indeed Launcelot, his son. Yes, you are right. Her name is indeed Marjorie. Her name is Marjorie indeed. I'll be sworn if thou be Launcelot, thou art mine own flesh and blood. So he says, oh, you indeed are my own flesh and blood. And he feels the back of Launcelot's head. My lord, what a bushy beard. Now actually he's touching his hair, but he behaves as though he gets the impression as though he's touching his beard. So he says, oh, you got a very rather bushy beard. You have got more hair on your chin than Dobbin, my horse, as on his tail. Again, as I said, comic element out there. Then Dobbin's tail must be growing backward. I am sure he had more hair on his tail than I have on my face when I last saw him. Lord, how you have changed, how you and your master, that is Shylock, are getting along. I have brought him a present. How are you? So he wants to know how is his and of profession, how is he doing at the house of Shylock. Now Launcelot says, well, well, but for mine own part, as I have set up my rest to run away, so I will not rest till I have run some ground. My master is a very Jew. Give him a present, give him a halter. I am famished in his service. You may tell every finger I have with my ribs. Now this is a reference which later on Shylock will have a totally different opinion about, right? So Launcelot here is saying that I have decided to run away and I can't really wait to get going. My master is a complete Jew. So in that sense, another instance where the word Jew is actually being used in a negative sense with a negative connotation. You are giving him a present, he asks him. He says instead give him a noose to hang himself, right? So you give him a rope to hang himself with. He's starving me to death. You can see my ribs so well, you can count them. In Act 3, Shylock actually refers to Launcelot as someone who keeps sleeping all the time and resting all the time and getting fat as a result of overeating. So you see, the servant and the master have very different opinions about what Launcelot truly is like. And he says, I am very glad you have come. Give your present to me to give to Master Bassanio, because he is now going to join the service of Bassanio. And he says he gives his servants good uniform, right? He gives them good liveries, as in uniform, right? Though one would wonder, how does Launcelot know about it? He may have heard about it, but we do know it for a fact that Bassanio is actually going to order new uniform before he leaves for Belmont to meet Portia and to take part in the casket scene. He says, if I cannot get a job with him, I will run away to the ends of the earth. Oh, look, this is lucky. Here comes Master Bassanio. Let's go and talk to him, Father. If I work for the Jew any longer, you can just call me a Jew. Again, using the word Jew as an insult, right? So at that time, Bassanio enters with Leonardo and other servants. So what exactly do you know about Launcelot as a result of this scene? Essentially that he does not enjoy a very great equation with Gobbo, right? Also Gobbo, because he's half blind, Shakespeare uses it as a pretext to indulge in some kind of a comic element out here, right? So that's what he's trying to do. The lines where he speaks about, as I have set up my rest to run away, so I will not rest till I have run some ground. Now here he is punning on the word rest. Now set up my rest is basically a term which was used in the playing of cards, right? Saying that I have made up my mind, set up my rest, okay. But the I will not rest means I will not halt, I will not stop till I have completely run away. What Launcelot says in the last dialogue in this particular part of Act 4, Act 2, Scene 2, right? Obviously, he wants him to give him a halter, a noose to hang himself with, because he believes that he completely starves him. So that's as far as explanation video number 1 of Act 2, Scene 2 is concerned. In explanation video of 2 of Act 2, Scene 2, we will see the interaction between Launcelot and his new master Bassanio and what happens thereafter, because now the preparation has begun for Bassanio to go to Belmont to meet Portia. We will see you in explanation video number 2. Thank you very much for watching.